You're sitting in a meeting. Your boss is explaining something important, a promotion opportunity, a project that could genuinely change your career. And you're nodding along. You look present, but inside your head, you're doing math. Not the meeting math. Your math. Rent is due in 6 days. You've got $340 in checking. You got paid Friday, but the car insurance hits automatically on Tuesday, and that's $187, which means you'll actually have $153. But you need gas, and your mom's birthday is Thursday, and you still owe your friend $60 from last month, and you completely missed everything your boss just said. And here's what's wild. That's not a discipline problem. That's not a focus problem. That is a brain chemistry problem. And there is a Princeton University study that proves it. My name is Hino, and I spend way too much time thinking about the psychology of money and why smart people keep making financially self-destructive decisions. If you're someone who feels like you're always one unexpected expense away from a complete financial spiral, and you've ever wondered why it feels so hard to think clearly when money is tight, hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up, because what I'm about to share with you is going to reframe everything you think you know about financial stress. Okay, so here's the thing. We talk about money problems like they're purely mathematical. Like the reason people stay broke is because they don't know how to budget, or they're not disciplined enough, or they're spending too much on coffee. And the solution we keep getting sold is just learn more, do better, try harder. But what if the real problem isn't what you know about money? What if the real problem is that being broke is literally, neurologically, making it harder for you to fix being broke? Because that's exactly what researchers at Princeton University and Harvard found. In 2013, a team of scientists published a study in the journal Science, one of the most prestigious scientific journals in the world, and what they discovered should have completely changed how we talk about poverty and financial stress in this country. It mostly didn't, but we're going to talk about it today. Here's what the study found. When people are experiencing financial scarcity, meaning they're stressed about money, they're worried about bills, and they're living with that constant low-grade financial anxiety, their cognitive function drops by the equivalent of 13 IQ points. 13 IQ points. Now, you might be thinking, okay, what does that actually mean in real life? Here's what that means. The average IQ is 100. A 13-point drop puts you functionally operating at 87 during moments of financial stress. Researchers describe this as the cognitive equivalent of losing an entire night's sleep. Or, and this one is dark, the same cognitive impairment as being clinically intoxicated. So let me paint that picture for you. You know how you feel at 2 a.m. after you haven't slept, trying to make a decision? Or how someone who's had too many drinks at a party starts making choices they'll regret? That is the cognitive state that millions of people are navigating every single day just because they don't have a financial cushion. And here's what most people don't realize. This isn't about being unintelligent. The study wasn't looking at people with low IQs. It was observing the same people, measuring their cognitive function when money stress was high versus when it wasn't. The same brain, different financial pressure, dramatically different cognitive output. This is where it gets interesting. The researchers called this phenomenon the bandwidth tax. The idea is that your brain has a finite amount of mental bandwidth, cognitive resources, at any given time. And when you're financially stressed, a massive portion of that bandwidth gets involuntarily hijacked by money worries. Your brain is running a background program 24/7 called, "How do I survive this month?" And that program is eating processing power you desperately need for everything else in your life. Think about your phone. You've probably had the experience where your phone gets slow and sluggish, and you can't figure out why. Then you open up the background apps, and there are like 30 things running that you forgot about. Close them all, and suddenly your phone is fast again. Financial stress is 30 apps running in the background of your brain. All the time. While you're trying to work. While you're trying to parent. While you're trying to have a conversation. While you're trying to make decisions about your future. And this is where the research gets genuinely devastating. Because it's not just that financial stress makes you bad at financial thinking. It makes you bad at everything. The study found that financial scarcity reduced performance on spatial reasoning tests, logical reasoning tests, and impulse control tasks. People under financial stress made worse decisions in domains that had nothing to do with money. Now look, let that sink in for a second. The financial stress you're carrying right now isn't just making your money life worse. It's making your work performance worse. It's making your parenting worse. It's making your relationships worse. It's making every single decision you make throughout the day slightly or significantly worse. And then we wonder why people who are struggling financially seem to make decisions that keep them struggling financially. We call it bad choices. We call it lack of discipline. But what the science is actually showing us is that poverty and financial stress create a cognitive environment where good decisions are genuinely, measurably harder to make. It's not a character flaw. It's a bandwidth problem. Here's the thing. This is a loop. Financial stress reduces your cognitive capacity. Reduced cognitive capacity leads to worse decisions. Worse decisions lead to more financial stress. And the loop closes. The question is, how do you break the loop? And this is where I want to introduce you to the most underrated financial tool in existence. Not index funds. Not crypto. Not some side hustle. I'm talking about a $2,000 emergency fund. Now you might be thinking, Kino, that's the most boring financial advice I've ever heard. An emergency fund? That's what my grandma says. And I hear you. But here's where I want to challenge how you're thinking about this. You've been told your whole life that an emergency fund is a safety net. Something you build in case something bad happens. A rainy day fund. Nice to have, but not urgent. That framing is completely wrong. And I think it's the reason most people never actually build one. Here's what an emergency fund actually is. It is a cognitive performance enhancer. It is a neurological investment that literally buys back your brain power. Let me show you what I mean with real math. Say you're currently living paycheck to paycheck with zero buffer. Every unexpected expense, a flat tire, a medical copay, a broken appliance, hits you like a crisis. Your brain enters scarcity mode. Bandwidth gets consumed. You're down 13 IQ points, functionally operating like a sleep-deprived, slightly impaired version of yourself for days, sometimes weeks, while you figure out how to absorb that financial hit. Now say you've got $2,000 in a separate savings account. That tire blows. You handle it. You transfer $180 from your emergency fund. You schedule yourself to rebuild it over the next 2 months, and you move on. Your brain never enters crisis mode. The background app never opens. Your bandwidth stays intact. Same income, same expenses, completely different neurological reality. And here's the math people miss. That $2,000 isn't sitting there doing nothing. It's generating a return every single day in the form of cognitive bandwidth you get to keep. You are thinking more clearly. You are performing better at work. You are making better decisions in every domain of your life. The ROI on that $2,000 is not measured in interest rates. It's measured in the quality of every decision you make from the moment you have it. Think about the decisions you've made while financially stressed. Be honest. The payday loan you took out because you needed $300 and ended up paying back $480. The credit card you put something on because you didn't have cash, and then the balance sat there and grew. The job offer you didn't negotiate because you were so desperate for income stability that you just said yes to the first number they gave you. The business idea you never started because you couldn't afford to think 3 months ahead. You could barely think 3 days ahead. Every one of those decisions costs you money. Not just once, they compound. The payday loan habit costs the average American over $500 a year in fees alone, according to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. The failure to negotiate your salary on your first job offer costs the average professional over $500,000 across their career, according to research from Carnegie Mellon. $500,000 because you were too stressed to ask for more money. That's what cognitive bandwidth debt costs you. Now look, I know what some of you are thinking right now. You're thinking, Hino, that's great, but $2,000 might as well be $2 million right now. I don't have $200 to spare, let alone $2,000. I get it. I hear that. And I'm not going to stand here and tell you to just spend less on lattes. That's not what this is. But here's what I want you to sit with. The version of you operating under full financial stress, down 13 IQ points, running 30 background apps. That version of you is going to struggle to figure out how to build $2,000. That's kind of the whole problem. The stress itself is fighting your ability to solve the stress. So here's the strategic reframe. Don't think of building your emergency fund as a financial goal. Think of it as a neurological project. You are doing brain surgery on your own cognitive capacity, $1 at a time. Every $100 you move into that account is a small reduction in your brain's scarcity burden. Every $500 is a noticeable decrease in background anxiety. And somewhere around that $1,000 to $2,000 mark, research suggests people cross a psychological threshold where their financial anxiety measurably drops and their decision-making measurably improves. Here's a practical framework. I call it the 1% bandwidth buyback. Take your monthly take-home income. 1% of that number, just 1%, goes directly into a separate, named savings account on payday. Before you pay anything else, before you buy anything else, the account is not called savings. It's called something that means something to you. Brain fund, freedom buffer, whatever makes you feel the weight of what it actually is. If you take home $3,000 a month, that's $30. In 1 year, you've got $360 plus whatever interest it's earning in a high-yield savings account, which right now, as of 2024, is paying around 4.5 to 5% APY. That's not enough on its own, I know. But here's the thing. Once you have the habit, you increase the percentage. You automate windfalls. Your tax refund. The average American gets back about $3,100 according to IRS data. Goes straight to the fund instead of getting scattered. You do that once, and you're most of the way there. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is directional momentum toward the cognitive threshold. Here's a story that puts this into focus. A woman I know, let's call her Dara, was a project manager at a mid-sized company. Smart, capable, great at her job. But she'd been at the same salary for 3 years because every time performance review season came around, she was so financially stressed that she just couldn't bring herself to advocate for a raise. The thought of her boss saying no, or worse, the conversation going badly and somehow jeopardizing her job, her financially anxious brain couldn't risk it. So she'd go in, get a 2% cost of living bump, smile, and walk out. She came across research similar to what I've shared today. She spent 8 months aggressively building a $2,000 emergency fund. Not because she expected an emergency, because she wanted to feel safe enough to be bold. At her next review, she asked for a $12,000 raise. She got $9,000. That's the return on a $2,000 investment. The fund didn't give her new skills. It gave her back her brain. And that's the point I want to leave you with. This is where it gets interesting, because we've been having the wrong conversation about money for decades. We treat financial education like the solution is always more information. Learn more, know more, do more. But information is useless to a brain that's been taxed into impairment by the very problem the information is supposed to solve. The first step in financial improvement isn't a budget template. It's not a spreadsheet. It's creating just enough financial cushion that your brain gets a moment to breathe, to think, to actually use the information you already have. You are not bad with money. You are a highly intelligent person trying to make good decisions with a bandwidth-depleted brain under conditions of financial scarcity. And that is a system problem, not a character problem. The $2,000 emergency fund is not boring grandma advice. It is a scientifically backed cognitive intervention. It is you deciding that your brain deserves enough resources to operate without a 13-point handicap. It is the first move in a game where every subsequent move gets better because the player making them is finally, fully, present. Start this week. Open the account today. Transfer whatever number feels like a stretch, but not an impossibility. Name it something that reminds you what it really is. You're not saving money. You're buying back your brain. If this hit different for you today, share it with someone who you think needs to hear it. And if you want to go deeper on the psychology of money and why so many smart people stay stuck in financial loops, I've got a full video on that right here. I'll see you there.